Okay. Last lesson, lesson 11, exporting files. This is the last lesson for MC101. So a lot of you guys have exported already. We've had a lot of experience exporting files. Now what we want to do is kind of just go in depth so you really understand how the export works and all the other different options that you do have when it comes to exporting files in Avid. There's a few ways that you guys can export your sequences out of Avid. Okay. One thing is that you can just export right out of the bin. So let's find our sequence in our bin. Okay. And you can do that easily by clicking on the Find Bin tool. So if I click on this button right here, this sequence should automatically highlight in my bin. Okay. And that goes for any clip or any raw clip. If you need to find it real quick in your bin, you can just hit that Find Bin button. So what you can do is you can do it a few different ways. I can right click right onto my sequence, go to Output, and then Export to File. Another way I can do it is go to File, Output, Export to File. Another way I can do it is by right clicking on my record monitor and going down to Export. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's click on Export. And the next thing that pops up is the folder that you're going to save your work to. Okay, so it's up to you guys to navigate to the proper work folder. All right, and for you guys, it's always on Edit Share. It's always the student resource folder. It's always your last name. Okay, so we'll put it into Brandon's and make sure you put it into the proper place. This way it's easy for us to find when we need to grab work to grade or if we need to grab your work to send it out for contests or anything like that. Okay, so now that I know where I want my exported file to go, let's go into the options so that way we can kind of focus on this little window a little bit more. This gives us all different types of options to export our files. Okay, if you look up in the top, we always have checked Use Marks, Use Selected Tracks, and Include Inactive Audio Tracks. What this stuff means is we want you guys to, I'm going to cancel out of this, always make sure your tracks are highlighted. We always want to make sure that the entire sequence is marked from in to out. So before we start to export, this is how your sequence should always look. The reason why we do this is because if you were working with a client and say you're working on a gigantic movie, say like an hour-long project, and your client only wants to see maybe 10 seconds of it or 10 minutes of that project, it allows you to export just certain chunks of your sequence. Okay, so that is why we get in the habit of always making sure our tracks are highlighted and always making sure we are marked in and out from start to finish. Sometimes if a track is not highlighted, only these selected tracks will export. So if I was to export my sequence like this, I would not get my title. And then I would play my Quicktime movie back and I wouldn't have a title. Same thing goes with music. If I only exported this, I would not have my title and I would not have any music. So it's important to make sure all of your tracks are highlighted and there's a mark in and out at the beginning and end. So I'm going to right click, go back to export. Let's look at the rest of this window. Go into options. You have the option, Avid gives you a lot of different options, okay, to export as. We always use QuickTime Movie. We could also export graphics if you wanted like a still frame. You could always export as a graphic. Choose your raster dimensions here, and then choose what type of picture you would like to export it as, JPEG, PICT, or whatever. All right, so it does give you that option. It also gives you an option to export just audio if you want. So you can export, these are all of your audio parameters that you can change if you just want to export as audio. But we're going to export as a QuickTime movie. Okay? If the same as source button is checked, okay, that means you are exporting it as the same as source encodes the exported file in the current media format. Okay, so if it's set to custom, the format option buttons become accessible. So if I click this to custom, all right, I can change this however I would like. If I do it same as source, it's going to just export it whatever the raster dimensions are of the original video. But we like to make it custom because we want to export it as 1920 by 1080. Okay, you can click on this little quick menu and pick however it is you would like to export this as. All right, but we're sticking with 1920 by 1080. That's high definition. We want size to fit. We never want to do crop and pad. We want size to fit so that way our video does not become squished in any way. We can go into down here below the different color levels. These are important because this tells Avid if you are exporting it for broadcast or exporting it for viewing online. Okay, so scale from legal to full range, and this is important to know, especially for the exam. Scale from legal to full range, which is what we keep it on, is for viewing on computers and mobile devices. Okay, so we always upload ours to YouTube, so we want to keep it as scale from legal to full range. If we clicked it on keep as legal range, this is for broadcast only. So if we were only going to broadcast our videos at a TV station or just on the server, we would check keep as legal range. So that way we're getting the fullest colors possible for the type of device we are watching on. Okay? So we're going to go back here. We're going to keep it on scale from legal to full range. Okay? Another thing, format options. You've probably seen me or Mr. Beals do this a lot of times if there's an issue with your export settings. We always want to make sure that these three are checked on. We want to make sure our compression is always at H.264. The quality is high. The keyframe rate is set to 24. And you can change those by clicking on the settings. So in here, you can see all the different options you have to export your video as. Okay? We're going to stick with H.264 and 24 frames per second, and we're going to keep the compressor quality at high. Okay? And those should be the settings for your when you go into format options. So when you guys go to export your videos, this is what your settings should always look like. You should always navigate to the proper export folder, which is always edit share in student resources for you guys. You want to make sure that all of your marks are on. You want to make sure that we're on custom and we're doing 1920 by 1080. To export out to the computer for YouTube, we're going to scale from legal to full range. Remember, that is for computer use. And we're going to keep our native dimensions, 1920 by 1080. Okay, we do not want to squish or extend our videos at all. All right. Also gives you an opportunity to save. You can always save these settings. So if you had different types of clients that you were exporting different files to, you can always save it as a certain export setting, so that way you can adjust it or quickly select what it is that you would like when you go to export it. Finally, the last thing I'd like to show you is QuickTime reference. What is the QuickTime reference? If I was to export this as a QuickTime reference, it's an option that exports as an empty container file that holds no media of its own. So if I export this right here, and then I play it on my off the student resource drive, I would see nothing. Okay? Instead, what it does is it references the original media files used by Media Composer. QuickTime reference files are useful for passing the video information between applications, but because QuickTime reference contains no media, they must be used on the same system. So if I send this file to someone on a different computer, they will not be able to see this. So I can export this as a QuickTime reference on my computer, but if I send this file Say if I come in to grab your work and you exported it as a QuickTime file and I put it onto my external drive, it's not going to work for me because it's using the original media from Avid. Okay, this is a great way to, if you need to export it quickly, and then use Sorensen Squeeze, okay, which is right here, to change it to a different media file. Okay, so a lot of times people will utilize the QuickTime reference if they want to squeeze it to a very low compression rate, so that way they can either show a client real quick what they have, or if they want to change it to a different type of export setting, or a different type of file, such as like an MPEG or whatever. Okay, but QuickTime reference, I wanted to make you guys aware of that because that is something that you may see on the exam. Okay, so I'm going to click this back to export settings. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to make sure that I'm exporting my video to the proper place. All right, I have my mark in and mark out set, and I can go ahead and hit save whenever I'm ready, and it'll export my file to the proper place. If you have any questions about exporting, always ask. I will see you on the flip side for the next book, but that is all for lesson 11. Leon out.